Hello, and welcome to Industry Innovators. Today, we're tackling a challenge that almost every small business owner in Alberta faces. How do you attract the right people to come work for you? It's no secret that finding and keeping good employees is one of the biggest struggles for local businesses right now. And the question is, how do you market your company so that people actually want to work there? My name's Allie, and I'm an HR coordinator with HR Advantage. At HR Advantage, we partner with small and medium sized businesses across Southern Alberta to handle HR, health and safety, payroll, compliance, and operations. So you can focus on growing your business while we manage the HR complexities. Our mission's simple. We exist to help employers attract and retain the right people by building strong workplaces that are proactive, responsive, and solution focused. So, today we'll be discussing how to promote your business as a place where people are excited to be a part of your team. When we talk about marketing, most people think about, selling products or services to customers. But marketing your company to potential employees is just as important. So maybe think about it this way. Customers are choosing where to spend their money. Employees are choosing where to spend their time and most often their future. Both decisions come down to trust, value, and perception. If you only focus on marketing to customers, you might build a great relationship and a great sales pipeline, but maybe you struggle with your team and you need to deliver on those promises. On the other hand, when you market your company as a great place to work, you create a pipeline of people who are excited about joining your team, even before there's a job posting. So today we're going to break it down a little bit more. We're going to review a couple of things. One, why is it important to actually market your company as an employer and not just as someone who sells products and services? What happens if you don't market yourself properly? And how to market your business authentically without it feeling too fake or too forced. And lastly, we'll look over some practical tips and examples that you can start using right away in your hiring practices. So, why does marketing your company matters? In short, it does matter. When candidates are looking for jobs, they're not just comparing things like pay and benefits. They're comparing workplaces. They want to know, what is it like to actually work here? Do people enjoy the culture? Do they enjoy their time here? Is this company stable? And will my values fit the company values? This is what we call your employer brand, which is your reputation and story you carry as an employer. Whether you're actively shaping it or not, you already have one. Candidates are researching you, they're talking to people in your network, and they're forming opinions based on what they see online or here in the community. So, marketing to employees isn't just about putting on a show, it's about marketing your story to tell it clearly and consistently. Just like customers, they want to buy from brands they connect with, who they hold strong values with. Employees also want to work for companies that they feel aligned with as well. And if you don't tell your story, they'll just assume that maybe there isn't one. Or worse, they'll only hear what others have to say about you. Let's just say for an example, let's say you run a small bakery shop in Lethbridge. Customers know you because of your great products. Maybe you have a fantastic bread selection, which would be lovely, and have great customer service, right? But if your online presence says nothing about your employees, potential staff, potential candidates who are looking for jobs, assume that maybe working there is just like another place to work. It's just another job. And meanwhile, your competitor is posting stuff about staff appreciation days, team celebration, growth opportunities. When candidates are looking for a job, which one do you think they're going to apply to first? Marketing your company as an employer helps build trust, credibility, and interest even before someone applies. Now, what happens if you don't market yourself? So, on the flip side, if you don't take control of your employer brand, someone else will. Silence speaks loudly. If candidates can't find any information about what it's like to work at your company, they're going to start filling in the blanks themselves. And usually people really don't assume the best. You know, Candidates may assume that your company is maybe not a serious or stable workplace. If your company has hasn't updated their website in years, or your social media is very limited, or really only talks about your sales, or things like that, candidates may think, maybe this company's not even hiring. They probably don't really invest in their people. And if they're not really showing any type of growth, or how the company operates, is this really even a secure company for me to work at? You know? And the reality is that you could be doing great business, but that perception is what could potentially cost you good talent. You're also going to look at potentially negative reviews or word of mouth, which could define your reputation. There's a lot of platforms out there, things like Indeed, Glassdoor, even things like community Facebook groups are often where people connect and talk about their experiences. So even if you're not actively sharing the positive aspects of your workplace, then only maybe the stories out there might be from someone who's left on potentially bad terms, right? One bad review can stick around for a long time if you don't balance it out with your own positive narrative. You're also going to spend a lot more time and money trying to convince people after the fact. Without a clear employer brand, every job posting becomes a sale pitch from you to start from scratch. You might get fewer applicants, which means you might have to pay more for advertising, extending posting deadlines, which means you're going to have someone potentially delayed coming into this work, or maybe ultimately, unfortunately, you're going to have to settle for a candidate who maybe isn't the right fit, or doesn't have the strongest skill set, but just to kind of fill that gap because you need somebody in there. Ultimately, it's not uncommon for businesses to lose out on great candidates simply because their online presence was outdated or lacking. For example, a candidate Googles you, sees that there's been no website updates since 2018 or something like that. And they're just going to assume, yeah, this company's probably struggling. They don't even pay attention to their website. When the reality, the truth, maybe your company's thriving and doing fantastic. But that lack of online presence wasn't telling the story to a potential candidate. There's also a cost of not marketing, and that's both indirect and direct costs. Now, what if you don't market your company to candidates? Firstly, you could have missed opportunities. Good candidates are always scanning the market, even if they're not necessarily actively applying for roles. If they don't see your company highlighted anywhere, if you're not on social media, if your website's not super accessible, or, maybe you're not even accessible through word of mouth, they might not even consider you as an option as a workplace to apply to. And that means losing out on potentially strong candidates even before they hit the apply button. It could also lead to longer hiring times. When your employer brand is unclear, you're going to naturally get fewer applicants. And the ones that you do get may not really understand, what your workplace is all about. That's going to slow down the whole process. You might have to post jobs multiple times, stretch interviews over weeks, and that at the end of the day, that's all going to put extra pressure on your current staff while that role remains vacant and waiting for somebody to fill. And you could also have higher turnover. Even if you manage to fill the role, if the candidate doesn't have a realistic sense of your workplace before they start, they may discover that it's not what they expected and ultimately leave quickly. That means basically you're right back at square one and have to repost, re-interview, retrain. And as we all know, that cycle is expensive, both in time and also in morale. So when we talk about the cost of not marketing your company, as an employer, it's not just about the dollars that you spend on things like job ads. It's about the hidden costs as well. Think of things like lost productivity, strained teams, morale dipping with your current team members because they have to pick up extra work. And also the missed chance to bring in people who might be a great fit and a long-term fit if they had only known your company story. So, how can you market your business and make it feel natural? At the end of the day, it really comes down to making sure that it's intentional. But the reality is that keep it simple. You really don't need, flashy advertising campaigns or really big budgets or anything like that. You really just have to be authentic and be true to your company brand. So ask yourself, what makes working at my business special? This is the heart of authentic marketing. Every business has something that sets it apart, and it's your role as a business owner to identify that and communicate it clearly to potential candidates. So, for example, look at what you do offer, right? Maybe you have a really tight-knit team. Maybe your team members are very close. Everybody knows each other by their name. Decisions are maybe made very locally, and people feel like more than just a number. They're not just an employee. They really do feel supported by their working environment. You also may offer flexibility to your employees. Maybe you offer adjusted schedules, flexible shifts, or maybe you're just really understanding when it comes to family commitments and things like that. That's a really huge draw for people, especially in small communities. So that's something that you're going to want to promote and put out there to potential candidates. You also may be able to offer a really great variety in terms of the work or the duties assigned to the role that you're offering. Often in small businesses, as there's less people, employees tend to wear a lot of different hats, and that can be really challenging for some folks. But for the right person, that might be really, really exciting to them. They get to learn, they get to do more things, they get to grow, and they maybe not. Wouldn't have had that opportunity in kind of a more rigored or structured role. So be able to promote that and let people know what to expect in terms of their kind of day-to-day responsibilities of the job. And further to that, also highlight the opportunities that you may have, especially to grow in a smaller team. When we think about advancement in jobs, we often think about moves up the ladder, vertical moves, things like that, a new title of promotion. But in reality, opportunities doesn't necessarily have to be a new job title. It could be something like taking on a bit more responsibility. Maybe they're going to be cross trained into a different role, so that gives them a little bit of variety throughout the day, and they get to take on a new challenge. Or maybe they could potentially have direct input into decision making that helps shape your company. All these type of things that maybe you can offer that other people, other companies or your competitors can't offer should be something that you're highlighting to potential candidates. So the key to all this is to align your external image with what you put in your job postings, on your website, your social media, and to make sure it's aligned to what your employees actually experience day to day. You're going to ask yourself, why does all that matter? You know, Ultimately, candidates can spot a mismatch faster than ever. Reviews, community feedback, even a quick coffee chat with someone who used to work for you, it all paints a picture of you as an employer. So authenticity means showing not just the good, right? You're not showing perfection here, right? You don't have to pretend everything is going to be easy or flawless, but it just has to be honest, and that honesty, and in the long run, is going to help build trust with potential candidates. And that kind of honesty is going to attract the right people, while helping others kind of select themselves out before they even apply. Now we're going to take a look at some practical tips for how you market your company as an employer. So let's get into some real world strategies that you can use. Now, firstly, you want to look at telling your story online. Make sure you're updating your website with a careers page, but you want to make sure that that career page is not just for job postings. Highlight your company culture, share photos of real employees doing real work, with their permission and consent, of course. But you want to make sure that you're keeping everything current. Keep your social media current. Show videos and photos of your team at work. If you're doing offsite events or things like that. Take videos around your shop, around your store. You don't want to share just your products, but you want to share the environment that you've created as well. It'd also be really helpful if you can showcase current employee voices. You might want to encourage staff to share their positive experiences. This can look like, short quotes, testimonials, or just even a really quick video goes a long way so that that person can see kind of a day in the life of and paint a better picture of the kind of day to day experiences of your employees. You also want to make sure that you're really clear in your job postings. Too often we see job postings read like a shopping list. You have your tasks, your requirement, and maybe a little bit a short line about pay and benefits and things like that. While that information is vital and is super, super important, it doesn't really give a candidate a real reason to choose you over another employer who's offering similar work, right? So instead, think of your job postings as a first impression. It should really answer the question that every job seeker has in the back of their mind. Why should I even apply here? Right? So you're going to highlight in your job postings what makes your workplace unique. Use language that's inviting and human. Make sure that it's not super corporate robotic. Avoid some buzzwords and jargons and things like that. Just keep it simple. You're going to want to set, realistic expectations as well. If your workplace and the task duties are physical, say that. If your environment is very fast paced, be upfront about that. Clarity attracts candidates who are ready for the reality of the role and reduces quick turnover. And then your job postings, you're also going to want to show a glimpse of your company culture. You can add a couple of sentences about your team, about the working dynamic, or even maybe some small perks that you offer that can potentially make a difference. And again, it doesn't have to be super super complicated or anything like that. It could be something as simple as we offer lunches on Friday, or our culture is built on mentorship and mutual respect. Just a couple lines so people can get a better understanding of what your company is all about. And then you're also going to want to make sure that you're aligning your brand. If your company is, let's say, family owned and really community driven, show your involvement on online and through your presence. Are you out there supporting local events or volunteering or anything like that? Capture that. That's going to give people a great picture of what it's like to work at your company. Or, potentially, is your company really focused on growth and innovation? That's fantastic. Highlight that. Highlight your new products, your new projects, different training and things like that your staff is doing. It just has to be aligned to what your company brand is and make sure that you're painting a picture so that people have a better understanding of what you have to offer. And lastly, you really want to stay consistent. And this is going to be consistent all across the board. Your job postings, your interviews, and your workplace culture should all match at the end of the day. Candidates are going to notice when there's a gap between what you say and what you do. So just remember, through all these tips, job postings are very effective in the sense that it's not just an ad, but it's going to rather be, kind of a window into your workplace. The clearer and more genuine you are, the more likely you are to get applicants who are both qualified and excited to join your team. So, some key takeaways for today. Marketing your company to your prospective employees may seem challenging, but this is your opportunities to let others know what sets your company apart from your competition. So, some key things that we chatted about from today. Marketing your company isn't optional anymore. It's the key to attracting the right people. And you have to have the ability to show people what makes you unique and why people would want to work for you over your competitors. You also want to make sure that you don't let other people tell your story. If you don't take that narrative on, other people are going to tell the story for you. And people will make assumptions. And for the most part, those assumptions are typically on the bad side. So make sure that you're getting in there to create a clear picture and a better understanding so that people can actually have, make a good assumptions on the things that you're doing for your company. And you also want to be authentic, highlight what makes your workplace real and valuable and what sets you apart from others. And lastly, you're going to want to use some simple practical tools, things like websites, social media, job postings. These tools and resources are to help share your employer brand. And above all else, consistency is going to be everything. You have to make sure what you say matches what you do. So, the bigger picture here is that effective employer marketing is not about spending big money running flashy campaigns, but rather it's about being intentional. Every small action you take to show your culture, your values, and your workplace reality compounds over time. When candidates see a consistent and authentic message about who you are as an employer, they'll be more likely to trust you, apply to job postings, and hopefully stay longer because their expectations match their experience. So, now we're going to chat a little bit about some common questions that we see. So, our first question here, isn't this just advertising? Not exactly. When we think about advertising, like I mentioned, advertising is about selling products and services. But for you as an employer, employer marketing is about selling the experience of working for your company. Your employer brand is your reputation and the story that you have as a small business owner. Employees want to work for companies they feel a genuine connection with. So, while it is advertising, it's about more than that. It's about showing the reality of the work that you've done as a small business owner and trying to bring in the right people to fit your team. Our second question here, what if I can't offer big perks or benefits or anything like that? To be honest, that's okay. You really don't need them. What we would recommend is focus on what you do offer, right? Take a look at what your company offers. Do you offer flexibility in schedule? Do you provide training or growth kind of opportunities? And maybe you provide a really supportive workplace environment where you get to do really interesting and varied work. That'd be awesome. What employees are really looking for is a workplace that respects them, supports them, and offers some measure of either balance or growth. And our last question here, how do I handle negative reviews online? These are tricky and these are tough. I don't want to underplay that. It's definitely a difficult thing when you are putting so much work and so much effort into your small business. But what's important to remember is respond professionally. You don't want to ignore negative reviews either. Show that you care about feedback and are making improvements. This is going to help build credibility. Acknowledge it promptly if you can, and just remember to respond in a calm and non defensive manner. Address any valid points that they have if possible. And, if the conversation is not necessarily going the way you want it, you can take it offline if needed. At the end of the day, a single negative review is not going to ruin your entire reputation, but how you handle it is either going to build trust or potentially damage it further. So, at the end of the day, attracting employees is just like attracting customers. People want to know who you are, what you stand for, and why they should choose you over others. You don't have to be the biggest employer in Alberta. You just need to be clear, authentic, and consistent in how you present your business. Thanks again for tuning in to Industry Innovators. If you found this helpful, please feel free to share it with another Alberta business owner who might be struggling with their hiring needs right now. And as always, please feel free to connect with us on social media or email us at hello@hradvantageservices.com if you'd like support building your employer brand. Thanks so much and have a great day.